But first, I just want to say such a huge thanks to Austin and Denise. This is an amazing conference. I go to so many of them, and the energy. Thank you. And also, you guys should applaud yourself because you've really made this huge step in your careers, whether this is your first novel that you're struggling with or you're looking to break through into more bestsellerdom or sell a movie or whatever you're doing. You made the energetic financial time commitment to come here. And as I've been saying all weekend long, the universe responds to intention. You've declared yourself as being willing to go deeper, to go to the next level, you know, whether that's up for you or deep, deep down into your craft. And that will pay off for you. So I just love coming to these things because I feed off of that energy. And I love listening to keynote speeches. I don't like giving them so much because that's just more work. But I love listening to them. What Reed said last night, getting to know him better even though we've known each other for years. Listening to Donna, listening to Cerise. I think that you really get a lot out of hearing how a writer sustains a whole career. Making that dream of writing manifest a reality. And I've been a professional writer for all of my adult life, basically, depending on how you want to define adult, but pretty much. So that's not a fairy tale that starts with a big advanced book sale and then you live happily ever after. You have to do a lot of adjusting and scrambling and making it happen time after time. And so I thought maybe we could break down the dream. You can listen to parts of my story and see the lessons there for just about anyone, including me, because you've got to look back over what you've been doing periodically and evaluate where you want to go next, right? And I think I'm kind of qualified to talk about dreams because I grew up in Berkeley. You can kind of tell that, right? Yeah, the universe tips that off pretty quickly. So not just California, but Berkeley, where I literally grew up reading bumper stickers that said, follow your bliss and do what you love and the money will follow. I love that one. And don't dream it, be it. That was the subconscious programming that I was getting when I was just a kid. But I didn't think that my dream was to be a writer. I really, some of you knew that from the very beginning. I really didn't. I was always writing. In fact, when I was 8 or 9 years old, we were putting on, writing and acting in plays that we put on in my best friend's garage, and charging the neighbors $1 to see these extravaganzas. So I learned a very early lesson that you can make money at your art, yeah? And I've tried to carry that out ever since. But I was not thinking that I would be a writer. I was a theater kid. I was really a theater kid. I love acting, singing, dancing. I did a lot of musicals, which is great training for writing horror, right? I don't know how that actually happened, but maybe rhythm, timing, or just because I'm a sort of bipolar person to begin with. Yeah, from musical comedy to horror. And theater is just about the best training there is for writing. But I still didn't think that that was my dream because even though I had all of that hippie programming, I also had parents who, like most parents, really didn't want any of their kids to go into the arts because no parent wants that. It's right. I mean, seriously, it's too hard. It is a brutal profession. It's hard to make a living. You work with crazy people all the time. You become crazy. There's sex and drugs and all those things that you want to keep your kids away from. All the things that push us into the arts are sort of the things that keep parents from wanting to support that. So yeah, they did a pretty good number on me to scare me to not want to go into the arts. They're scientists. they really had no concept of that, and that it was a viable profession. So in high school, I did all of this theater, and I was getting all of that audience response and the training of what makes a story and what is engaging and what makes character. But I would say that I wanted to be a lawyer or a psychologist. And then something happened when I was 16 that really changed everything, really changed my life path. I was an exchange student at 16 to Turkey, to Istanbul, with this hair. Blonde American 16-year-old in Istanbul on my own, and it was life-changing, but it was also life-threatening. I mean, really life-threatening. I was sexually harassed constantly on the street. There were rape attempts, thank God, nothing ever happened. Some of my friends were raped. And suddenly I was thrust into this incredibly misogynistic society. And don't get me wrong, I'm not letting the US off the hook. Girls are harassed daily in this country, and it is profoundly damaging to girls and boys. It's a serious problem that we are not addressing as a country. But to have that happen on such a level, two things came out of that for me. One, I realized at 16 that I could die. I could die right there and never get home again. So I basically had a midlife crisis at 16. And I knew that I come from a country where the Declaration of Independence gives us the inalienable right to the pursuit of happiness. I mean, that's profound. It's in the Declaration of Independence. And those two things made me commit to my dream. Because I knew if I ever got back to the US alive, and I wasn't sure that I would, I was going to do what I wanted to do. So there's your first lesson. Commit to your dream, however that is. And it is for life. It's your life you're talking about. You have the right to the pursuit of happiness. So I came back, and I went to college at Berkeley, and I majored in theater, and I just didn't tell my parents about it. I just did it. And that's another good lesson, is like, don't share your dream with people who are not 100% supportive of it. And I was getting scholarships, so it's not like I was taking the money from them and running, but I was just not letting them in on the full situation of my absolute plan, which was still to be an actress. But Berkeley was an amazing training crucible. Such a talented group of friends that I started out being in a theater company with. Even, we were all very young, but we coalesced into a company, and we're doing shows not just in the department, but making our own shows and taking them out and making money at them. So there's another thing that's very important. Find people who share your dream, because you will learn from them, but you all know that because we're all here, right? And another thing came out of that, which was that I realized I wasn't that great an actress. I really am not. I'm okay. I can be very entertaining on stage. I'm a better dancer, I always was, not a very good singer. And so I realized what my talents weren't, but I also wrote my first one-act play. It was performed, and I realized I'm a pretty talented writer. So there's another lesson. It's like, be realistic about what your real talents are, because you have them. But the real success comes out of following the one that really is the one that you're meant to do. And it might not be the fun one, but you will find what your talent is if you practice the craft. So after college, my friends and I were still doing political theater in Berkeley. That's sort of Coles to Newcastle, but we were making some money at it, so I was actually practicing craft and practicing the business of theater. But we were all very over-involved with each other, if you see what I mean. So we basically imploded from youth and incest. And I also realized that no one was going to pay me to do political theater, and I didn't want to have a day job. I wanted to do what I love for a living, full time, because you can do it 24 hours a day and still not have enough time to practice what you want to do. So after college and after this theater group sort of went wherever it went, they're still my best friends, but we just don't practice that together anymore. I decided I was going to move down to LA and become a screenwriter, because I didn't want to be a novelist. I was a dramatic writer. And that's pretty much what I did. I packed my few things and I moved down to LA, where the jobs are. I knew that, at least. That's the only thing I knew about the industry, though. Absolute naivete. And that really saved me, because if I knew how hard it was to break in as a woman, as a young woman, as someone who doesn't have a trust fund, which they actually say to you, but don't you have a trust fund to fall back on? No, I didn't. But I did the absolute right thing, because what did I say? When you commit, the universe opens up paths to you. So my next door neighbor was a story analyst for the movie studios. Do you know what a story analyst is? You basically, yes, I know you do. They're readers. They hire kids out of college to do basically book reports on the vast amount of material that comes in and is submitted to the movie studios and production companies and agencies. Factory warehouses full of scripts get submitted to the studios every year. They literally have to move scripts by forklift. I mean, not anymore because it's digital, but that's the way that it was. So, because no movie executive ever has read anything, they hire kids to do book reports so that they don't have to read it. So that's what I did. I got a job as a story analyst, and I read tons of material, and you can see what a good training that was for screenwriting. I was reading millions of scripts. I could see by the first page if it was worth continuing or not. I also learned the format right away, and I also learned the players of the industry, because I was taking notes on all of the agents who ever submitted, and writing my own script at the same time, and knew exactly what I needed to do. I knew when it was good. I wrote with a partner. We had a terrific domestic thriller, basically. And when we were done, and our critique group said, yes, that's it, critique group, another lesson, I had the whole list of agents who had the same taste as this particular thriller was, and I could just cold call them, say that I was a reader with this production company, and that I'd read this and that of this client and of theirs, and every single one of them said, send the script. Just like that, we got multiple offers of representation, chose the best one. He took that script and sold it to 20th Century Fox in a bidding war, which if you're going to break into Hollywood, a bidding war is a good way to do it. I highly recommend it. So I did get the huge advance and the breakthrough and the dream, right? But, you sense the but going on, right? So what are the lessons there? I did my homework on the business before I ever tried to submit anything. And this is something that I see beginning writers do all the time. You're so tired by the time you finish that book. That should be enough, shouldn't it? But then you do no research into the person who is going to be your business partner and represent you. And you have to get this, people. If you haven't done this before, the level at which you break into the book business is the level that is going to be very difficult for you to break the ceiling of. So you owe it to yourselves to get the best possible representation you can get, because that agent is going to mean the difference between a living and having to toil away at a day job. And it's just about the agent's contacts. So if you don't know that, you can end up with someone who is never going to help you make a living. And it is very hard to reinvent yourself if you have broken through at not a livable wage. So that problem I somehow got away with in Hollywood. And I think partly that was because I had done good work elsewhere. I had only 2 jobs before I became a professional screenwriter, basically that wasn't at college, working in the library kind of thing. I worked at the Bodhi Tree bookstore, metaphysical bookstore. Great, it's now defunct, but it was a world famous metaphysical bookstore in LA, which gave me plenty of time to write and do the reading that I did. Very, very important research. I'm going to write supernatural thrillers to be in an occult bookstore. And oh, the people. So there was that, and I also taught English and history part-time in the LA County prison system to juveniles, incarcerated juveniles. And that, if anyone's read me, was profound in terms of setting my social agenda. What those kids, the potential they had and the potential that was wrecked and squandered, and the injustice of the system really got under my skin and ignited this social anger in me that has driven everything that I've written ever since. So there's a lesson too. You need to not just work at your craft, you need to get real life experience so you actually have something to write about and you find your passions that way. So anyway, I had broken through into the glass dome of Hollywood. I worked steadily for 10 or 11 years after that. I was always hired, which is amazing considering the stats on women writers in the business. And I did novel adaptations and I did original screenplays. And it all should sound so great. So I was making a living as a writer. That's what I hear a lot of writers say, I just want to make a living as a writer. I would suggest to you that that dream is not specific enough, because you can make a living as a writer doing a lot of things, but that doesn't mean that you're doing good work or work that is satisfying to you. And I did good work, but Hollywood is a very creatively unsatisfying place to be most of the time. Only it's so much fun that you don't really see how miserable you are. So, it is glamorous. You're working with actors, you're working with brilliant minds, and sociopaths too, lots of things. But I was getting so frustrated by having my work rewritten and not having movies made because of circumstance. And that's basically the job of a screenwriter, is to not get movies made and to be fired off your own work. That is the job description. And I realized at a certain point that I had to do something else. I snapped. I honestly did, and Michael Bay was not the cause of that, but the production companies involved in that situation. My partner and I ended up doing rewrite after rewrite after rewrite for free on a job that we knew was never going to be made into a movie because it was so mishandled. And so, at the same time, a script of mine that I had set up with me as producer and gotten my very favorite indie director attached to it. It's just a dream situation. It fell through because the director got another movie got a green light before ours did. So I got my heart broken once again, and I swore that I was not going to put up with this anymore. And I took that script, I got the rights back to it, and I started writing a novel while working on the day job from hell, which happened to be a film job. I would go home, like a lot of you do, after a full day's work, or two full shifts of work, and I would write 1 page a day. And if I couldn't write 1 page at night, I would write a line. And a line would turn into a paragraph, and a paragraph turns into a page, and a page turns into 5 pages. And let's do the math here. 1 page a day, 365 days, that's a novel. That is a novel. There is no excuse for you guys not to be writing a novel a year. Now you have to rewrite, obviously, but that is the math. That is not difficult to do. So whatever you're doing, if you can't get a page a day, you're doing something wrong, and you're not going to, you have to make room for that to happen, because then the universe will help you finish it in whatever way. And of course it didn't take me a year to do that. It took very little time, honestly. And I had already paid all my dues as a screenwriter, so I didn't have to pay any dues to get an agent. I just gave my film agent the book. He gave it to a bunch of agents that he knew, and I got offers of representation. I chose the best one. I knew who was powerful and who wasn't. And 2 weeks later, I got a 2-book deal from that ghost story, my first book, The Harrowing. So, great, happily ever after, right? It was very lucky for me to make a lateral move into books. But I did it at a time that the industry was undergoing this sea change that was, it's the biggest thing since the Gutenberg press, which is what? E-books, e-readers. And I did 4 books with a big 6 publisher. Now it's big 5. Next week it'll be big 4. They're consolidating. That's not good for us. But I did enough books with them to realize how the business sort of worked, and to realize how behind the curve my publishers were about e-publishing. And at the same time, I have had friends like Joe Conrath, Blake Crouch, early adapters to ebooks, who were making a fortune, and older friends of mine who got their backlists back and suddenly had their retirement income from doing ebooks at the time. And I decided I was going to do that instead, because I was so freaking terrified at how uninformed my own publishers were about this revolution that I was seeing. They had no clue. And so, and I didn't just do it. I studied it for a year while I was writing the first Huntress book. And by the end of that year, I was following Joe religiously. I was asking people who were doing it. I was just stalking them, basically, and seeing how that worked. And it was scary to do it this way, but I e-published Huntress first, and Huntress Moon, and I made more money in the first 2 months that book was out than I had ever made for it my entire traditional romance, and continued to make money off of it. So what's the lesson? Make sure you're watching the changes in the industry. You have to be aware of what's going on out there so that you can take the opportunities and know when you have to make a change, to reinvent yourself. And that's not easy, and it's not fun. But that is something that you have to do to sustain a writing career, a viable writing career. So then after, and the whole e-publishing thing, I want to stress this, and we will tomorrow. You know, anything that you want to ask Cerise and me, and I think there's somebody else who's going to, who's in. Oh, fantastic. Oh, that'll be fun. Look at that. We will try to talk you through some of these things, but you can't learn what you need to know in an hour. It took me a year, and I sort of knew what I was doing to begin with. So e-publishing is this amazing new tool for writers that can seriously sustain your income if you know what you're doing. If you know what you're doing. But just like if someone parked a 747 in your yard and gave you the keys and said, here, it's yours, it's great, right? But you still have to learn to fly it. Same with e-publishing. Same with e-publishing. And audiobooks, less risk, but there's no, if you think that you're just going to hit print, you publish, and people will find you, you are in for a really rude awakening. But we have that choice now. If publishers turn you down, you can put the energy into e-publishing. You can do what I do, which is I keep control of some of my books so that I can control the sales and drop the prices, because pricing is a huge issue. You're never going to get people to read you as a new writer if your ebooks are $13.99. That was one of the scariest things. That's just not realistic. But I also, my publisher, Thomas & Mercer, came to me and picked up the Huntress books because Amazon Publishing tracks who makes a living at e-publishing. And that e-publishing has become sort of the new slush pile in many ways, that every publisher knows who's making a killing on e-books, and they come to you with deals. So that's another venue, and I think of it as just different income streams. You know, I have control over my own ebooks. I have Thomas & Mercer doing the heavy lifting for marketing for the Huntress series. It's all sort of symbiotic, but if one of those tanks, I have the other. So it's like a financial portfolio, really, if you know anything about stocks. I know you're writers, but some of you must know something about money. It's a useful skill to have. So I think of my books partly as a portfolio and with asset income. So we're in a great place. It's the most exciting time it's ever been to be a writer, because there's not only those options, but there's webisodes that you can do on dramatic storytelling online, if that's what you do well. You can make your own book into a movie or episodes. There's graphic novels, huge business. Middle grade has exploded, and there's this whole area now that people cannot get enough middle grade books, especially for boys. There are so many ways to be a successful writer now. That is the great thing about where we are. So that's sort of where I am, and I've come full circle with the series being picked up by a production company is packaging it for television. I just wrote the pilot, so I had that experience. I can bring that, and because this is a very political series, I trick you into reading it because you think it's a great thriller, but it really addresses all those social issues that I have been burning about since my time in the prison system. Rape culture. It's really about the third rail of crime. But television is extraordinary right now, and writers have more power in television now than I would ever have had it as a feature writer. I'm an executive producer on the series. We'll see what happens. It could be a disaster. It could be my worst nightmare, but I have to keep my follow your bliss and intentions pure and fight for the series that I want it to be. So again, writing a book wasn't enough, and being a published writer wasn't enough, and being a pretty successful published writer wasn't enough. I needed to take all of that and use all of my craft and my experience to make something that I really passionately care about in a social sense. So once again, I was redefining the dream. And do you see that you have to keep being specific about your dream? What is it that you want out of writing? What is it that you want from this career? What do you want to do? And when you make lists, those things sort of come true. I really have found that you should have seen the list I made just before I met Craig. It was so specific, I am ruining the day I ever said accent. If I had known what it was like to live in a full country of them. So be specific, but be careful what you wish for, because when you wish, it's powerful. So I'm going to, I have the list down here. Hopefully I've covered all of these topics. What have we learned from my story? Realize that you have the inalienable right to the pursuit of happiness. Follow your bliss. Be specific about your dream. Protect your dream from people who might not be completely supportive. And women, I'm talking to you. Surround yourself with people who are also pursuing their dream. Learn your craft, get trained, learn the business, get life experience. Watch for business trends that will affect your ability to make a living. And be aware that your dream will evolve. Check in with yourself periodically. Ask if you're really doing what you want to be doing. Do what you love, and the money will follow. And I'll end with this quote, which I'm sure you've all heard before, often attributed to Goethe, but it was actually a Scot, as I've been told many times. William Hutchinson Murray. Until one is committed, there is hesitancy, the chance to draw back, always ineffectiveness. Concerning all acts of initiative and creation, there is one elementary truth, the ignorance of which kills countless ideas and splendid plans. That the moment one definitely commits oneself, then providence moves too. All sorts of things occur to help one that would never otherwise have occurred. A whole stream of events issue from the decision, raising in one's favor all manner of unforeseen incidents and meetings and material assistance, which no man could have dreamed would come his way. Whatever you can do or dream, you can begin it. Boldness has genius, magic, and power in it. Begin it now. Why are you not in the bar at night? That's where everything happens. It was just the couple of us, and I went to bed early. You need to be in the bar at these things. You don't have to drink, but you need to be in the bar.